Welcome to this new edition of Scholastica's Water Cooler Chat series, where we invite scholarly publishing stakeholders to discuss how the industry is evolving. My name is Danielle Padula. I'm the head of marketing and community development at Scholastica. Today, I'm joined by Ashley Farley, Senior Officer of Knowledge and Research Services at the Gates Foundation, where she directs open access policy and communication and supports the Foundation's library services. We're going to be discussing recent shifts in funder OA policies, what it means for publishers, and how publishers can best support the needs of authors. Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
And I know that you've been at the Gates Foundation for a little over 10 years now. That's amazing, starting as a graduate assistant and working your way up to your current role. I've been at Scholastica for a similar amount of time, so I know it's definitely a journey.
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you, what has that journey been like for you, particularly reflecting on the evolution of the open access publishing movement in that time frame?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is really fun and excited to
Mhm.
chat about it. Yeah, I mean, in the decade, I think one of the things that's really shifted is what I think is possible and what I think our priorities should be. The landscape has shifted a lot now with the emergence of AI and different technologies. We're seeing academic publishing and open access try to maneuver that landscape. I think when I started out, still very new and being introduced to the complexities. Like, this is a very complex space, and I often am very impatient for things to change and adapt. But also in 10 years, that's not a lot of time in the publishing landscape in academia. So things do often change, slowly, gradually, which with the good intentions is important. But I often find myself wishing to see changes a lot more, and to have that, to be able to think about it and change, I think, in a positive way and not be maybe feel like we have to be reactive. I think we're kind of in a state right now where we're very reactive to what's happening, especially in the US politically, reacting to emerging technologies, and it would be great to shift that to be more proactive.
I think a lot of people feel that way. And it's true, really, 10 years when you think about it. It's funny you say that because I had this thought a little while ago with the start of Open Access Week this year. But
Yeah.
I see, there's so many different opinions and perspectives, and that really keeps the ball rolling, obviously. And I've noticed for some, it seems like there might be a bit of a sense of frustration that it takes time. But it is also
Yes.
so interesting because when you think about it from sort of a macro level, like to shift an entire industry and entire models of
Yeah.
publishing and funding and all these things, 10 years really isn't that long. So I think we have a ways to go, but certainly lots of progress has been made, as we'll discuss. And I know as of January 2025, the Gates Foundation discontinued support for individual article publishing
Yeah.
fees and made the shift requiring authors to post preprints of work funded by the foundation, including manuscripts and underlying data. This coincides with the launch of VeriKive, I love the name, a new verified preprint server co-created by the Gates Foundation and F1000. Congratulations on that milestone as
Thank you.
well. Can you walk through that pivot and why the
Yeah.
focus on preprints now?
Yeah. I again, starting out in the space, I very much believed the idea that there was enough money in the system and that we could just like eventually magically switch everything to full open access as it's published now. And I no longer believe that that's true, or if it is true, it's going to cost us way more money than is already in the system as we see. Of course, acknowledging it does cost to publish, but I would also argue that traditional publishing, kind of as it is now, is not fit for purpose in a lot of ways. And we see the constraints of peer review, we see the constraints of just how much is being published, how much is being funded to publish, the persistence of publish and perish still, libraries struggling to be able to afford a subscription. So I think that overall the system is in a lot of strain, and it's right and a good time to rethink publishing in how we publish in general. And some, I think, call it the, moving towards more of like a publish review curate system. It's something we're definitely very interested in Gates, and I see this as kind of a way for the foundation to pivot towards a different future and kind of stopping what we know is not achieving what we want in open access. It's not paying a lot in APCs. We've heard a lot from the global community that the APC model is inequitable. So one way to solve for that is to stop paying them and reinvest our funds in different ways. So but we still wanted to have, of course, a way for grantees to achieve open access, to be able to kind of have still full rights and full control to what they're publishing. So preprints were a great venue to achieve that. They're easy, no cost to author or reader, and then that allows us to rethink how we're supporting open access business models. So kind of our two strategy tracks moving forward is, how do we ensure a healthy preprint ecosystem, because we know there's a lot of potential think drawbacks or concessions we're making around like discoverability and trustworthiness. Also one of the reasons why we launched Verichive. But then also, yeah, think it through more sustainable open access business models and see if we can shift to that format and scale it. So not the end all be all of an open access policy, but I think one way for us to be able to make an important pivot and try to make some real change in the space.
Sure. And I know the Gates Foundation is a member of Coalition S, which for
Yes.
those watching, that's a multi-funder initiative to make full and immediate open access to research publications a reality. Your OA policy updates followed Coalition S introducing a proposal called Towards Responsible Publishing that happened in 2023. And that also advocates for preprint posting via green OA or publish review curate model. Some are calling that Plan U.
Yeah.
That proposal is still in development. I know it went through its initial round of global
Mm-hmm,
consultation, so I'm sure there will be updates to come. At the same time, Coalition S has been involved in efforts to advance Diamond open access publishing globally, wherein journals or alternative publishing venues are free for both readers to access and for authors to publish in. So there are quite a few OA publishing routes getting attention right now, getting some sort of TLC. What do you envision for the future when you think about sort of the mix of publishing routes that might exist and where we
Yeah.
are?
I think one of the biggest lessons we've learned through Coalition S, especially, there's different funder groups involved. So we have national funders, more of like we're private charities funders, or more of like funding institutions. Is that there's not a one size fits all model, nor maybe should there be. Maybe as we test these, we can see what are the models that may win out, so to speak, or be the easiest to implement. Yeah, so there's not a one size fits all approach. So we want to make sure that as we build a strategy moving forward for the coalition, we're able to be as inclusive of all funder types and abilities around policies to have or spend on open access as possible. So there'll be more on that coming out in the new year. So keep your eyes open for that. And for me personally, I think there's a couple things that are being tested now, and that we can learn a lot. And my goal is to remain, somewhat flexible, and I hope the ecosystem can as well. We're involved in Diamond Open Access as well. So we're starting to see, like, as a private foundation, what are some of the ways that we can fund and help grow that community. I also personally really like the subscribe to open model. We're also helping support that community of practice. And that's been such a great space for all stakeholders. It's one of the ones where I've really seen like the publishers involved, like, want to make change and try things out. I know that is, the models come under some scrutiny. There are many that don't think it has any staying power, but I'm excited that there are publishers who want to try it, and we share data pretty openly, and are learning from each other and adjusting as needed. So I think, it really does also depend on kind of the size of the publisher and how they're publishing. But I think those are the kind of the models that we're looking, and try to see, like, what is the least like business model path of resistance, and test those and see what we can scale from there.
Sure. And I think definitely for publishers, it's interesting because even with a nonprofit, the idea of a business model, and even though it's not profit, the idea of being able to have and maintain surplus is so important to the
Yes.
organization being able to survive and to thrive, hopefully. So that's great to hear. And I know that you're also working with PLOS on some initiatives. Is that kind
Yes.
of still, it seems to be in development from what I'm seeing. Is there anything kind of to share on that front?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, is we're kind of in the still in the first stage of that work, but it's threefold. One, I know knowing that when we made the no APC announcement, that of course, we no longer require the journal version of record be made open access, but that kind of policy really benefits the hybrid journals. So fully open access publishers or journals are at a disadvantage there. Um, and first, our goals are really to find partners and work with organizations that align with our values. So PLOS is a nonprofit, really open, science-driven organization. It made sense to continue to support them. So the kind of three-pronged approach we have right now, one is our grantees can still continue to publish there without facing APCs. So it's kind of almost, I mean, like a fully OA agreement, as some might say, not a transformative agreement, but but we wanted to make sure that we, PLOS being one of our biggest open access publishers, that we didn't create more barriers, especially for our grantees in LMIC areas. So that was important. We also covered the any need for waivers for PLOS Global Health. So one of the things that has always kind of concerned me about our open access policy is we've always supported the fees for our funded authors, which is great, but there's already a certain privilege there to be funded by the foundation. We would often receive many requests on a daily basis to cover APCs for or underfunded authors. So I want to make sure that we can have a policy and structure where it's not just our authors benefiting, but authors everywhere. So how can we really improve the equity of those kind of models? And then third is doing the research, and this is also similar to a grant that they have with some other funders around the sustainable alternative business models. So what does the future of that look like? I think that also requires, and I think it's been acknowledged that the way that we think of an article now is and how it goes to the publication process, and then it has an APC to kind of pay to recoup those costs, is not going to be the model moving forward for either the creation of the article or for the payment of the costs that go into that. So trying to rethink of like, what does that future state look like of what is kind of considered like the knowledge stack, and then how do you make sure that the costs that go into that are then covered. So that work is early on. They've been doing a lot of workshops globally to get kind of perspectives of especially researchers and kind of what their needs are, and we've learned a lot in that process.
Sure. And it seems that there's always kind of a need to connect the researcher, the publisher, the library, all these entities. It's sort of interesting. I've had multiple
Yeah.
conversations with people where in the publishing community, we're all thinking about these policies and changes all the time. But for the researcher, it might not necessarily be, it's not going to be second nature at all necessarily.
Yep, yep.
So there is a need for that education piece for sure. And I'm curious, I know you mentioned diversity of models and kind of the current political times that we're in. How important is diversification becoming to you and your team as you think about the future, just sort of given shifts in government policies and funding
Yeah.
and global, just sort of mechanics of the way that underlying foundations of the research ecosystem work right now?
Yeah. It's especially since I'm sure you've seen the announcement that the foundation now has a 20-year runway.
Yeah.
So we won't exist in 20 years. So that already has me kind of thinking about a longer term strategy of how do we set up kind of our legacy around like open access policy and infrastructure systems and work, so that they last longer than we do, and kind of helping prop up that system, which I think does require diversity of a lot of different elements around funding, participation. A lot of the conversations I've had last few months, especially, but just in general, I mean, there is a real push and desire to host an ecosystem where we can have more flexibility around publishing and reading in different languages. That's very important, and that's something that I think is positive of maybe like AI and these kind of emergent technologies that we can do finally more efficiently, and just a less focus on, I think, global north perspectives and how knowledge is captured and disseminated and how it's counted. So it's great to see that shift happen as well, and I think a lot of good can come from that shift. I think still the biggest barrier really is, and as it always comes up, is that academic incentive piece. And so
Mhm.
um, I think the organizations that have been really pushing for open access to norm for quite some time know this has been a barrier, but are now realizing that it's something that we can't kind of push to the side anymore, and will take hopefully more concrete steps and get institutions much more involved moving forward, so we can actually make some progress in that space.
Sure, absolutely. And thinking about publishers supporting the needs of authors as OA policies keep evolving, publishers are evolving their practices in relation to that, and just changes in the environment in general. What stands out to you as sort of the most pressing steps publishers can take now to support authors, and how do you think about publishers supporting the needs of authors in the future? And I know there's also kind of the piece of who has the onus for making sure that the author knows what they need to do and is able to
Sure,
do it. I
sure.
know there's sort of the different
Yeah.
players involved, and coordination among them as well. So I realize this is becoming a big question, but I'm curious your thoughts on supporting the needs of authors, I suppose, generally.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, and in these kind of talks, I can tend to overgeneralize all publishers together, and that's not the case. And there are definitely publishers that I think are more motivated to make sure authors' needs are being met than others, and others are much more effective in that space. I think the conversations around rights retention has been really interesting. It's actually one of the reasons too that we decided to go in all in on preprints, is the evolution of some of the publishers that really want to restrict sharing of the outputs, and really pushing towards either it's APC Gold open access, or kind of completely copyright lockdown paywalled articles, and kind of no in between. And so kind of seeing a shift where there's not a lot of green OA or flexibility unless there's a long embargo. So yeah, so we saw a lot of shifts there, and then authors being quite confused as to that landscape, kind of what our expectations were in sharing, and what we think of as rights or retention is given to our grantee authors through grant agreements versus what publishers may require in copyright transfer agreements, and authors trying to navigate that space. With a lot of legalese, it's often very hard, and they're not sure what to do, and they're not sure like which agreements may take precedence or what. So navigating that space can be really really difficult for authors, especially when they get to a point where they want the article published, and they're very ready to get to that point. Yeah, so I think it'd be great to if publishers did host kind of more flexibility in that downstream sharing space and rights retention of authors. And I do love your point around like whose kind of responsibility is it. Like I feel as a funder sets a policy, we try to communicate what our expectations are up front, but we've seen a lot of success with the publishers who link to our policy, who make sure that information is very upfront and central if they're an author that declares Gates funding, versus trying to fix things downstream after like acceptance or even publication is much more difficult, and in general just creates a frustrating experience, I think, for researchers all the way around. And I want them to feel good about open access. I want them to be able to share their work and want to get it out there more broadly, so we try to make that as seamless as possible.
And from conversations you've had with publishers around rights retention concerns, preprint concerns, what would you say to the publisher that is wary of that right now? Like, have there been any sort of breakthroughs in terms of finding common ground and, making, having a similar vision as far as like that uh, OA route option?
I think it really depends on the goal of the publisher. So when we're talking about some of the big commercials, it's very difficult to make any headway, and they definitely want to keep as much of the copyright or rights as possible to be able to protect kind of the revenue streams that are around that. Other publishers that are much more mission aligned, kind of no matter if they're nonprofit commercial, are much more flexible. And I think, yeah, they set policies that are much more flexible.
Sure. And as a final sort of wrap up question for publishers that are trying to keep pace with changing government policies, open access policies, all of these like shifting factors. I know I myself, I find days where I'm like, there's so much to read, there's so
Yes,
much
yes.
to process. How do you do it? What advice do you have for all of us trying to keep up? I know maybe AI will be a great tool for many of us, like a sort of researching
Sure,
assistant.
sure.
But yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hate to say at this point, but I have been using LinkedIn a lot to keep up to date with things coming in. I do miss kind of the earlier days of social media where you kind of found those people that were talking about this frequently enough. There's still, I think connecting the groups that are interested in things that you are will help that stay up to date. So I'm in several like funder open access groups, so we're constantly sharing information with each other. Again, kind of recommending if there's any librarians or publishers listening that are interested in the subscribe to open community practice. It's a pretty open group to join, and we share a lot of information there. Yeah, so still kind of just being in different groups or listservs is how I still get most of my information, because I don't otherwise know how to. I need that somebody else to curate it for me, which is great.
Yeah, no, and it's great to be in community with people. I know I just recently went to a scholarly publishing meetup here in Raleigh where I am. It's nice to have
Yeah,
in-person conversations too,
exactly.
and to hear from others because there certainly is so much to keep track of, but a lot of exciting things. And I appreciate you taking the time to share updates from Gates and your thoughts on the industry in general. This was a really interesting conversation. I think many will be interested to learn more and follow the updates. Gates has a great newsletter to keep
Yes.
track
Oh,
of.
thank you. Yes, we do.
Yes, I encourage people to do that. And of course, visit the website. You'll see the latest news there too. But I find the newsletter very helpful, so I want to give
Oh,
that a
thank you. That's
shot.
great to hear.
And is there anything that you want to share that people should know in this like last minute? Anything that you'd like to kind of put out on the platform?
Yeah, we're just closing out, open access week. We did a really fun influencer campaign. So to figure out ways to share those videos again with the broader audience, but just always trying to get the message of open access out to a wide of audience as possible. Because I think as we have, people that aren't in kind of our certain circles that we already are in all the time, it'll really, really strengthen, the impact we can have.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, Ashley. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. And we'll be looking forward to following the latest updates on Gates. Definitely others keep a lookout for the latest news. Thank you again, and we hope everyone has a great rest of the day.